Welcome everybody. My name is Mike Levine. Hopefully you know me by now as Motorcycle Mike. So today I want to give you a little bit of instruction in insurance policies, particularly motorcycle policies. You know, we all get those policies in the mail, and most of us don't bother to ever open them up and see what kind of coverages we have, and that's mistake number one. And we want to prevent those kind of mistakes because you need to know that you have really good coverage on your motorcycle. I see so many accidents involving motorcycles where there's totally inadequate coverage, and my hope is that by educating all of my viewers and my fellow riders on the contents of a motorcycle policy, that you get adequate coverage. Listen, there's the story about the saying that there are bikers who have gone down and there's bikers that will go down. And unfortunately, it's a dangerous sport that we love. So rather than take your chances, you need to make sure that your coverage is adequate in the event that you have an accident. So this is Classroom 101. This is basic instruction on the contents of your motorcycle policy so you know what you're purchasing. And I'm going to make some recommendations along the way about the type of coverage you have, because unfortunately a lot of times I see badly hurt bikers with coverage that is totally inadequate, and we want to prevent that from happening. And if I can prevent that from happening by educating you on the contents of an insurance policy and the type of coverage that you should have, you're going to be that much better off. So we have here a standard policy. This is a gentleman who was insured by Progressive. By the way, Progressive is not a bad carrier if you're getting your insurance coverage through Progressive. Unfortunately, this gentleman had a very, very serious accident and resulted in the loss of his right leg. And I wanted to show you the types of coverage that he had available to him to try to compensate him for the loss. And frankly, there's no sum of money that's ever adequate enough to compensate a person who's lost a limb. But I want you to understand the type of coverage that this gentleman has available to him on his own policy. So what we have here on this policy is this thing right here. It says BI, $100,000 each person, $300,000 each accident. That's a good rate of insurance. But let me explain this to you. That protects him in the event that he's negligent and his negligence hurts another individual, whether it's a pedestrian or another a biker or a driver of a car. It doesn't help him in the event that he needs compensation for his injuries. So that $100,000 each person means, hypothetically, if he's on his motorcycle and he hits somebody who's crossing a walkway and that person sues him, that person could possibly recover up to a maximum of $100,000 on this gentleman's motorcycle policy. The $300,000 each accident means that his insurance company has a maximum exposure of $300,000. So say he's riding his motorcycle. Let's say they have a car full of passengers, and that passenger goes off the side of the road, and the passengers and the driver in that car are hurt. His insurance company has a maximum exposure, no matter how many people from that car are injured, of $300,000. That protects him in the event he's sued. It doesn't protect him in the event that he needs to sue. $100,000 per person, $300,000 per accident is bare minimum coverage that you should have on your motorcycle policy in terms of liability coverage. Myself, because I do this for a living and I'm just so aware of the dangers of being a biker, I happen to have $1 million of liability coverage, and that's something that costs me about $3,000 a year. If you can afford $3,000 a year, then that's the kind of policy you should have. So this property damage liability, $50,000 each accident, what that means is that if he causes damage to somebody else's property, his insurance company, again Progressive, has a maximum exposure of $50,000 of property damage. So his insurance carrier will pay out up to $50,000 for the damage caused to somebody else's property by reason of this gentleman's negligence. All right, so wrongful death is the same thing, $50,000 per person, $100,000 per accident. There's nothing that you need to be concerned about right there. That's not really a concern or anything that needs to be paying attention to in policies. So, mandatory personal injury protection. This is really important. $50,000 limit, no deductible. $50,000 limit, death benefit of $2,000. So, that protects pedestrians. So let me just tell you this. If he were to hurt a pedestrian, then his insurance company will pay that pedestrian's medical bills up to the tune of $50,000. It doesn't protect him in the event that he's got his own medical bills, and if he has a passenger on his motorcycle, that person is also not protected in the event that that person incurs medical bills. Here's the hard truth. Bikers and motorcyclists in New York don't get no-fault benefits. Passengers on motorcycles don't get no-fault benefits. What that means is that if a biker is hurt, his insurance company, in this case Progressive, doesn't pay his medical bills because bikers and passengers on bikes in New York State do not get no-fault coverage by law. This only protects pedestrians. So if he hurts a pedestrian and that pedestrian brings a claim against his insurance company, Progressive, will pay out $50,000 in medical bills incurred by that pedestrian. And if he kills the pedestrian, his insurance company will pay a one-time death benefit of $2,000 on top of possible exposure of $100,000 to that person, or if he kills that person. So, moving on down, maximum monthly work loss, $2,000. That means that this owner of this insurance policy has the right to receive $2,000 per month from his own insurance company for his work loss. So if the gentleman is out of work and he's not getting any form of lost wages from his own employer, or he doesn't have a disability policy, his insurance company will pay up to $2,000 a month of lost wages. Now, this thing right here, supplementary uninsured, underinsured motorists, this is the most important part of your policy. This gentleman has $100,000 and $300,000. That means that if there's multiple people on the motorcycle, which is not really applicable, I'll tell you about that in a second. So, this stuff is super important. Here's how it comes into play. Now, in New York State, the minimum insurance on a vehicle in New York State is $25,000. So say our friend here is cut off by another driver, and that driver has $25,000 of coverage on his car or her car, which is the minimum required in New York State. And say the gentleman that owns this policy has very significant injuries. If the other insurance company for the other driver offers $25,000 of coverage, the full policy on that car, then this gentleman who owns this policy can receive another $100,000 on his own policy of insurance for his personal injuries, less the $25,000 that he received from the insurance company that insured the other driver. So his maximum recovery would be $100,000 for his injuries, $75,000 coming from his own policy. I know it says 100, but he gets a deduction for the $25,000 he received from the other driver's insurance company, and then on top of that, he can get another $75,000 to come up with $100,000. And then this $300,000 would be applicable if there are multiple people on the motorcycle. The maximum exposure the insurance company would have would be $300,000 no matter how many people were injured on that motorcycle. So comprehensive $500 deductible and collision $500 deductible. That means that his insurance company, if he has damage to his bike, the insurance company will pay for the bike less a $500 deductible. And then roadside assistance is if he needs towing, then his insurance company will pay for the towing of his motorcycle bike to a shop or wherever it's got to go. So this is a very basic policy. It's not a great policy. It's not a bare bones policy. It's a basic policy. I would not recommend it. I would recommend a policy that has at least $300,000 of supplementary, uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage. If you have $300,000 of what we call SUM coverage, that's an abbreviation, then as a matter of law, the liability policy would have to be $300,000 as well, instead of $100,000. That's a minimum that I would recommend. If you can afford more, you should buy more, because unfortunately, what we do as bikers and motorcyclists is somewhat risky, and to adequately protect yourselves, you got to have adequate insurance. So take a look at this policy, try to get more than this. You can see that the total cost of this policy per year is $352. It's not a big expense for $100,000 of liability coverage. If you can afford $300,000 of SUM coverage, that'll give you $300,000 of liability coverage, and that would it wouldn't double this cost. It might add another $50 to $75, bringing it to about $425 for good coverage. $425 to protect yourself in the event that some numbskull runs you off the road when you're on your bike is money well spent. Let me just explain one more thing, and then I'm going to give it a rest. Motorcyclists, we do not have no-fault coverage. This $50,000 only protects you in the event that you hit a pedestrian. You don't get $50,000 of no-fault coverage by law in New York State when you're riding a motorcycle or a bike. Your insurance company that you have through your employment, if you don't have the insurance through your employment, then Medicaid would be responsible for your bills. You should make sure that if you're riding a bike, frankly, that you have some form of insurance, not Medicaid, because Medicaid is bare bones. You should buy your own policy of insurance. Hopefully you get insurance through your employer. If you are insured through your employer and you're hurt while you're on your bike, your employer's insurance company by law is responsible for payment of your medical bills. And depending upon who that insurance company is, they may have a skin in the game, which means they may be entitled to get a recovery out of your end of the settlement proceeds. So 631-293-2300, extension 118, that rings right through to my desk. If you have any questions about your coverage on your policy, please give me a call. I'll be happy to take your phone call. I'll give you a little bit of education on your insurance policy. And my obligation is to make sure that all bikers and all motorcyclists that are riding in this state have adequate insurance. It gives you peace of mind. I want to make sure that you have peace of mind. This is Motorcycle Mike. Ride safe, please.